right. Hello, all. I am going to talk a bit about Edacore, which hopefully means less work for everybody. So an introduction, who I am, something about the idea of this, what the scope of the project is, that's very open. What I imagine are some deliverables for the first version. The concept of parameterization, which I think is an important part of this project. A bit about developer resources, my plans for the future, and perhaps others, and some tags. So my name is Peter Stuge. I started taking things apart when I was 4, and a little bit later I managed to put some things back together, and a little bit later still I managed to build some things of my own. And I've kept going ever since because it's a lot of fun. I do software as well as hardware on many different levels. I have lots of register programming experience on machines from 8 to 64 bits. I've also done web backend things. I make PCBs and schematics every now and then. Nothing too fancy, but what's needed. You might have seen me in or around the Coreboot project, libUSB, Osmocom, open source GSM things, libSSH2, or perhaps Cheaprog, a lesser known but still interesting project. I'll mention that at the end if we have time. So the Edacore idea is really simple, and I think anyone who is or has done something in this domain has already had it. The point is we have a lot of duplicated information, a lot of duplicated data where we don't really need to in lots of different tools, in different tool suites to start with. But even within a single tool suite, we have perhaps different data formats for things that could actually be sharing a single data format. I want to make a part library that can do anything that the open source tools need, and also ideally serves the industry. So anything perhaps before and after, well, mostly after the design tools. I think that the Edacore data should be usable also by the fabs. So I'll get back to that in a bit. The killer feature of open source is really reuse. So we need to do this, I think. And I also, show of hands, how many people have created a footprint based on a data sheet? How many of you thought that that was a bad idea and that you shouldn't actually be, it shouldn't be necessary to do this? Yes, okay. So let's fix that, and I would like to have the vendors input their information because they are producing these data sheets anyway, right? So they have this information structured somewhere. I want to import this into Edacore and use it and stop making these footprints on my own. This ties into, but sometimes you don't want to use exactly what they recommend, and this ties into the parameterization, which I'll get back to. Already now, so this is the first time I ever publicly mentioned this project, and it's as it says on the bottom, this is completely vaporware at the moment, but we'll see. Still, there is one major component vendor who has said that they are willing to convert their internal data. So that's awesome. And I also got an email day before yesterday from a tool vendor who's here and who wants to talk to me and maybe use this or maybe help work on it. I don't know. I hope we can have a chance to talk still later. A benefit of Edacore, as I see it, is also that it's going to be more up to date. It is more up to date. You can do online updates, and I suppose that the commercial tools do that as well. But the open source ones don't yet so much. And versioning of the libraries, also, I think, important feature to keep track of what you have in your design, what you used, and how things change. So, but yes, vaporware so far. Let's see. A question that we have to think about is what is the scope of this going to be? And my quite ambitious goal is really to go from right from the beginning to all the way to the finished product, but baby steps, right? So I think the first step is somewhere schematic PCB boundary, or perhaps going into both of them a little bit. So something like symbols and perhaps net lists as well. But if we're doing net lists, then as we heard before, or as we know, then this is also important for simulation. So then we suddenly have to consider one more set of requirements or specifications, needs. So far, they're all flat text, which is good. In flat text in the open source tools, this is good. Verilog seems to be popular for the netlist, so maybe that will simply solve itself, and Edacore won't need to deal with netlists, and that will all be Verilog. It seems to be going that direction. Footprints aren't shared, aren't common. And then there's what I call parts. So that's, so far, my highest level concept in for the data model. So grouping symbols and footprints and lots of other things also. 3D models for a part. And so what is and parameterized parts. So different kinds of packages for a particular part, perhaps, is needed. If you have in the schematic, you want to say, I'm using this circuit, this IC, but at that point, you don't care what package it is in the board layout. You do. Still, this needs to be the same. It is the same circuit. So for simulation, you don't want to have two different ones. You want to still have just one. And the vendor will also probably only have one model for this. So yes, need to keep this in mind. And for board files and Gerber files, and as it says on the end game, they're going to foundries and so on. There's a lot of geometry to consider, and yes, this is also still open. What exactly? So how much to try to do? How much can be done by a single data model? What I think should be in 1.0 is the start of a data model. So abstracting the formats that are there so far, and some kind of database implementation for this model. I envision a C library for accessing the data. So this is what application developers can use, should use, to work with this data. Nicely versioned and easy to use, and with a permissive license so that it can be used really everywhere without any problems, and we just get it out there. Web application, I think, is important for crowdsourcing data so that people on the web and at home can put their things in. But we want to know if they did that, so that I keep track of what I've done and I know that that's good or bad. Parameterization. So there are a few use cases where that I've come across where I'd like this to be possible. So maybe I want to adjust some drill sizes across the whole board. That's easy to do in GDA, not so easy perhaps, or less easy in KiCad. I don't know, I haven't tried it. More difficult is the second one. I want to hand solder this board, so please extend all the pads outward from the packages so that I have a bit more space to work with. But this is only applying to the footprint, and I don't want to make a whole copy of the footprint and mess around with that and keep two of them. It should be all associated to this one part. And simulation and other use cases will add just more requirements, but also more possibilities. About developers, it was said before, there are few engineers who do both electrical engineering and computer science. It's more and more locked into the industry, the knowledge. I think, so I've heard from several academics here, please push your students to do cross-discipline things. I think this is hugely important. I also know that we have some great developers in this room, and we've already heard about 2 instances of sort of overlapping work with the netlists in Quax and ngSpice. And GDA, there are the netlists that seems to be converging on Verilog, which is great. There are the board files and there's footprints which are at the moment different in KiCad and GDA. And I propose to let's do these things just once and do them right and do them together. So the project exists only with the name. I have a bunch of domains registered, and I'm setting up a track in the Git there and starting to write some code. Until that's done, please come to Freenode. And if nobody else is going to help, then I will slowly start to do this for footprints and try to use lib Edacore in both PCB and PCB new. So I'd love to speak with Wayne about the footprint, what the footprint data model is in KiCad, and learn about that while we're here. And that's what I have to say. So thanks for listening, and thanks to the volunteers and Javier for arranging this.
Any questions?
C. You can. Let's talk.
Will it include licensing information about a model in the model?
So yes, I think metadata such as licensing, right. Question is, will the data model include licensing information? And the answer is yes. I think that is a very important thing to include. I also asked about models.
Well, what we see now in commercial packages is that they include licensing models, and that the licenses are all over the place. So even though you have the model, but you want to make some money out of the PCB, you can't use the model, depending on the license. So it is become more and more important about being able to use the model, even though the rest of your stack is open source.
Right, yes. So
what a lot of us have done with GDA is we've licensed the actual footprints and symbols under GPL, but made it explicit that they're allowed to be used for designing any kind of board.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to copy or create a derivative of that footprint or symbol, you'd have to keep those derivatives also under the GPL, but it's okay to use them to design proprietary boards.
Okay, yeah.
So this is
from then easily model.
Yeah.
Which you can't close.
yeah. So some comments about licensing. How many proprietary libraries contain models and symbols which are difficult to reuse, and a comment about many GDA symbols and footprints which are licensed under GPL with an exception for commercial use or any use.
It's the same way that it's okay to use GCC to compile programs that are proprietary.
Just like GCC can compile proprietary programs. Right. Question?
Not just an annotation. I came across a similar idea just from another direction. I want to take a schematic from everywhere and want to repair this board. So I need something like an instruction how to start, which point to measure, and so on. And my suggestion is to simulate different errors, stack adds, bridges, shorts, and so on the board, and get out the data, compare the data, and just build in an instruction. But to do that, I need all the models for all the transistors, for all the chips, for all the stuff which is on the board. And so I have the same problem to get all information from everywhere. So for me, it would be quite nice to have one point where all the AER models and so on are collected.
So yes, it's great. I was amazed a decade ago when I started doing this that we didn't have all this already. But for talking to people, they use the proprietary scripts because they trust the footprints and worry that if we have random free software footprints, they might be wrong and broken and not quite right. And it doesn't matter when you actually try to build, especially dense boards. I guess that's a risk. We just have to do a decent job.
So
I guess you've got to get manufacturers on the board to actually
So a comment is that many crowdsourced footprints, many people are worried about quality of crowdsourced footprints. And yes, and I'm worried about the quality of my own footprints even. But it is a key thing to get the vendors involved in this and have them provide their footprints. And it seems like they might want to, yes.
I was going to react to that. I am doing work in a research environment recently in the engineering design. We were not permitted to use footprints which we hand-made ourselves and verify per according to our internal standards. And that's something you're going to run up against if you want to get into the commercial world.
That's a great point and a good input to consider that there are sometimes very specific requirements on footprint standards or symbol standards for that matter, which need to at least be documented in the metadata so that the tools can find them and decide whether, and the user can decide whether this is a usable piece of data or not.
Would you be able to like to sign, a vendor can sign a part?
Why not?
Certifying that that part is from that vendor.
I think some kind of authentication of the source of, so the question is about signing vendor data. If the vendors would be able to sign their data, and I think that's important. I think it's yes, there's some kind of certification or yes, makes sense.
One last one. We thought around the issue we get, because of this problem, everyone wants their only trust their own footprints. We end up with the same thing from 16 different sources. And we thought about how we, you just write that down, but then there's a problem of being presented with nominally the same thing in 16 flavors, and you don't know which one to pick. I suppose
Well,
for this, we just put it in the data, and it's a user interface problem of how to choose which one you're going to use.
So, question about how to deal with many different versions of essentially the same footprint, for example, or symbol. The important thing, and a comment that it's a user interface problem, yes. The important thing is that these should all at the very least belong to the particular circuit, the particular chip that they are for. Let's start there, because at the moment they don't. At the moment it's just a flat namespace of lots of different parts and baby steps and associating different footprints with one particular part so that at least the symbol stays the same, or there are the 2 variations of the symbol and 4 variations of the footprint, and I can choose which combinations I like, but it's still the same logical part. Is something I'm looking for. Time for one more?
But it's a comment rather than a question.
Oh.
There are ISO standards that exist that define ISO standard definition of how to manage part data. So potentially, if we were looking or interested as a community to try and go the standardized route, potentially we could look and pick up those standards.
I think that's a really good idea. So there, a comment that there's previous work and ISO standards. Certainly, let's see what they've done, and if it makes sense, and if it's enough. Possibly it isn't really enough for what we want to do, or it's too complicated for what we want to do. Then maybe we don't do that in version 1, or maybe we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.